Right.
All right. Do you guys have any question related to last week's session? Any hiccups? Any blockers? Any clarification? If not, we'll anyways cover that again today as well when I'll be talking about features. Uh, so let me share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, Sumit.
Okay, great, great. So this is the main GitHub link for Karate. Now the idea is that all the information is there on this page in this repository, but then you need to be aware of what exactly sorry, what exactly each component does and what are the features that we talk about karate and how is it better than any other framework, API framework, testing framework in the market, right? So if I go below, they've created an index where they've given all the features that they have related to karate. Now I can go uh, in a random manner to talk about the features. I have prioritized a list of what I want to show you. But since there are so many features, so many things that we need to talk about, we'll not do any uh, code practice along this, right? We will be talking about the code. They have already mentioned those codes here, but then when we do our next session on the framework, we'll be implementing some of the features that we have discussed here today in that framework. Just give me a second to mute my phone. Yeah. All right. So when we talk about karate, right? So the first thing that we talk about is what is it in karate that makes it really stand out from the current frameworks on the market, right? And why do we use this framework for API testing and not others like Rest Assured, Postman, uh, custom Python frameworks that we can use uh, for the API testing, right? Now, the idea is that this allows you to create a test without having deep knowledge of the language, right? Having knowledge of the language is good enough for the more complex interactions of API and to create custom functions. But as such, when we look about with the evolution of API testing frameworks, specifically in Java, right? I'm going to talk about Python or other languages. They may be a little advanced in terms of implementation, but none as simple as what Karate was able to achieve. What Karate was able to achieve is a domain-specific language syntax, which is basically running on Gherkin and Cucumber. Uh, the idea behind that is that a lot of things are baked into the Cucumber itself, right? And not writing custom codes or boiler code to just stand up one test, right? We have seen that in our last session on how simple it is to create a test and run a test. But I'm going to talk about the body of the test and the features on uh, extra capabilities that Karate provides, right? So when we look at this, right? So we did a GET request, right? Now, this is a POST request that has a body, and the body comes with uh, a keyword called request, and this is the JSON. So basically, this means that uh, it's parsing a JSON request to this URL, and it's posting that request and getting a status 201, and then matching that response with ID. So look at this part, right? So the ID, what I'm matching with ID is that it should have an ID, but it should not be null, right? I don't care about if the ID is 11, 12, 13, 14, but it should not be null. I should have an ID come back to me. And the name that comes back. So if I take the same example of user from our last session, the name, whatever we are passing is test user, And ID, we are not basically matching it with the exact value of 11, but whatever ID comes to me, I'm okay with it, right? The only part I'm considered about is that I have a return ID and that ID is not empty or not, right? Now, as it says before, right? JSON is native to syntax, intuitive DSL for HTTP, which is method post, which you can use get, put, delete, any method that you want to use, right? And the assertion that you're doing it in one line. So the best part about Karate is the assertions, right? What we are validating, and that becomes the more important part of any testing that we do, right? The whole point of testing is to assert something or to match something, right? And that this makes it really easy for you to do that. And then you can continue in continuation with the previous request. You can create a second HTTP call using the same response that you have received, right? So when you look response, so we are testing response.id. So we are picking up whatever ID is present here, and we are doing a method get and getting the status 200, right? We're doing the same thing. What we did for user, we are basically fetching that user ID, and then when we do a get request on that, the status should be 200. Right now, let's work around the index, right? And I prioritize some of the things that I will tell from each thing that makes sense and will help you get up to the speed as as uh, as easily as what we did in our last session, right? So you can have a Maven configuration for your Java or a Gradle configuration, right? I, it's up to you what you use, but then you have uh, a quick start to it. So when you look here, the quick start shows you that you can use this MVN archetype, so which is Maven archetype, which you can use to generate your base code, right? And then you have certain naming conventions. I won't get into it. It's basically a guide of the naming conventions, but you can definitely use your own. But then it allows you specifically for uh, basically your structure, your folder structure. It should have some kind of conventions that you can use, but then this is not is basically a guide and not a mandate from Karate. Right now, this just makes it simple that you are basically dividing your classes into logical groups where you have animals, and then you have animal.test, and within those animals you have cats and dogs, right? And then and then you have cats features and then cat runner. The same way you have dog features and then dog runner, right? And then for this is basically your global configuration, which animals, both cats and dogs, can use, right? We will talk about this when we go to our next session for the framework. This is mostly a framework component. And then the running part, right? So we can run it through JUnit 4, JUnit 5. So when we go to JUnit 5, the only thing that we need to add is first we need to add it in the POM file. If I go here, if you look at the POM file, it shows that I have included JUnit 5. I can use Apache or Jersey server for the executions. And then I can run in multiple ways, right? So this is one way, is that you're running a sample, which is basically your feature file, a class name, which is relative to whatever folder you're in. And then you can also create tags and run those tags. Or if you want to run the full path, you can provide the full path of the feature file and then run whatever is inside that feature file. It can be tags, it can be all classes, right? Okay. So now we move on to the parallel execution, which is very important. So it allows you to run parallel. So there are multiple ways you can run parallel. In JUnit 5, you can have a separate configuration to run in parallel. For another way is that you include the runner inside inside your run class, and then you can define the parallel executions, which currently here is 5. So you can run this feature file with tags, certain tags, and you're doing an parallel run of 5, right? Now, there are multiple features of parallel runs. You can rerun some of the files, fail test. You can also uh, skip some of the tests that you want to do. Here it's skipping the tags which are ignored and running everything in that particular package, but not running text. And then you can do multiple and or operations in terms of tags. You can add multiple tags, or you can tag in a multiple way and showcase within and. For example, you have an application and it should have a tag of dev as well as any release tag that you are required to execute, or you can have a build tag related to which that test has been created, right? So on the run part, we talked about how JUnit 5 helps you, but it's not mandatory to run JUnit 5. You can also use ng-test to run this. Uh, but then JUnit 5 is just, I guess it's better than ng-test for now. Uh, so the support is there for both, but again, parallel execution you can do in both ng-test as well as JUnit 5. Report, the first thing is I'm going to talk about is the environment switching. So when you run the test, this is the command line to run the test. You can specify the environment in which you're going to run the test. And you are going to create a file called karate config, which is a JavaScript file. So it embeds, it not only creates the BDD structure in Java, but there are configurations that you can do in JavaScript. I guess the technology behind this is nashorn. But then the basic idea is you create a function of JavaScript, and then you define your configuration, environment configuration here itself, right? So when you look here, the environment is karate environment, and then we are going to set something by default, right? So if you don't provide an environment, the environment will default to dev, right? And this is the global configuration, right? So which is your base configuration where you have app ID, app secret, some URL base, and another URL base. But if you specify the environment as stage, then some URL base will change to this one, right? And if you specify as end-to-end, your URL will change to this. So everything else remains same. All these things remain same. The only thing changes is some URL base. So tomorrow, if you want to create another environment or your URL changes, you only need to change it in one place. The idea is that if you're going to provide these URLs in the test itself, like we provided it here. So if I go here, users.feature, I'm providing the URLs here. Now let's assume I've created the same URL for different feature files, let's say 20 feature files. Now I have to go individually in each feature file and change that particular URL. So in order to eliminate the environment dependencies, we have this JavaScript config file that helps us define those variables, and it runs before you execute any test. You can either define those in the command line execution, or you can define that in any CI/CD tool implementation that you're doing. Right. And then again, there are different types of report. One is what you have called the cucumber reporting, where you get your features and all this particular dashboard, and then the detailed execution of each and every step. If you want to expand it, so if you expand one test, it's going to expand it like this, right? And it's going to tell each one on what to do. If you want to write um, custom messages here, you can use logging. Uh, so when you look here, we have uh, XML configuration file for logging. We can use this, and which is basically telling you at what pattern you want to log, and if you want to log in a particular file, which is karate.log. So if I go to reports, I should have uh, target. I should have a file here called karate.log, and then I can write any custom messages that I want to write inside the test. All right. So that was related to, so even if you're not able to understand completely what configuration to do, or what changes you need to make to the report, what I would suggest is you use the default ones as a start point, and then keep changing them to see what makes more sense to you. If you want to do performance testing, you definitely want to capture some of the timings in between requests. So what you will do is you will do custom logging there to get the report timings, and then put assertions on the performance saying if it takes more than particular amount of time, then it should fail, saying performance failure, right? So the logging really helps you in creating multiple types of tests, not just API test as well, right? So you can use that for multiple purpose. For, let's say you want to create an insights uh, on your testing, and saying that if a user clicks here and or user sends a request, how long does it take for the request to come back, or what is the amount of data that is coming back, right? So those kind of things you can log. We already talked about JavaScript functions. We mainly use it for the configuration, and then you have different types of variables, right? You have a def variable, which is basically if you provide a value uh, inside your test, which is in BDD. So you can get that value inside this variable, and then you can use it in your further requests. Actions. So there are multiple actions that you can do. You can assert, you can print, you can replace, you can get, set, right? So all these actions. So assert is one. So assert, if I'm defining a color red and a number 5, I'm asserting color plus number should be equal to red 5, right? Which is basically your very simple assertion. So whenever you look at this, it means you're getting these values from the response, right? So for simplicity purpose, they're providing it to a variable, but all these values should be in the response. And if you want to print something, how to print something, all those actions are there. One important action is call. So basically, this means you are calling other feature files before you. Let's assume you're creating a feature file, but you need some other feature to be executed before you can run this feature because it's a dependent feature. I don't recommend this approach, but then there are times when you would need other feature to be executed just because you have created your framework as a modular structure and you don't want to embed the same code of lines again and again. So you would need those as a callable or a reusable feature file, right? So if you look here, I'm giving headers a value which is reading my header.js, and then I am providing a sign-in variable where I'm calling this function, which is my sign-in.feature, and the username I'm providing is John and secret, right? And then auth token, which is basically what sign-in is doing, is doing an authorization and signing in based on it. Right? So the headers, what I'm getting is from this file, and I'm calling this feature and providing the response and sign it. And then I'm just getting the auth token out of it from the response, which sign in provides me with the JSON body of auth token. And then you have a HTTP request that you can use. The most important part that I think is the request. Request is basically where you define a body. So you can define body in multiple ways. Let's assume your body is too long and you have put it in a file. So you can also provide request as read my JSON is the file name .json, and then you can also use variable for a particular request. So if you look here in the previous session, what we did was, if I go to this feature file, if you look here, this is my variable. So I used it as not as a request, but matching with the response. So similar way, the request, I'm using the variable user, which is basically this, right? So you can have multiple bodies of JSON, and you can use them as your request variable or your a response variable, but then it doesn't need to be in the test itself. You can have it outside the test in a separate file with this request and just read that particular file. So it will be very easy. So if I'm using this body in multiple requests, I don't want to keep typing this or copy pasting this in different tests. I will keep this outside of my test as a separate JSON file, and then just assign that file to the request, right? And that makes my life much more easier in terms of maintenance, as well as the readability of the test. Okay. On the request side, you have multiple request types that you can send. You can send headers with a request with a header. You can set a form field or multi-part file, right? So there are chances where let's say you want to upload a file as a request, right? So you can use a multi-part file as one of your request types. So if I go to multi-part multi-part file. I think this will make it important. So this is how multi-part file works. So my file is the multi-part file body, where you're reading a file called test.pdf, and then you're uploading the same file with content type application PDF, and then you're sending a field message and you're posting that to that URL, right? So basically, you are, as a part of the request, you are uploading test.pdf with the name upload underscore hyphen name.pdf. This is the more complex one in terms of sending request, which is the multi-part file again. But then Karate makes it really simple in a single line. You can do that. And then you have headers where you are providing some authorization IDs and extra tokens, and then you are providing that as headers. You can also provide cookies in the form of cookies. So all these are baked into Karate, so you don't have to create your own request. Everything comes baked in, and you just have to provide the values, right? Otherwise, you have to create the whole body with headers, with request and request type. Let's move to response. So response again. I guess the response, yeah. So this is how you get a response. You can just have a variable response, or you can have the body, JSON body as a response dollar, and then you can do whatever you want to do with the response. So sometimes you want to match JSON path. So dollar will help you create that JSON path for you. If you want the whole response, you just provide the response as such. And then what you do is you're matching the response dot name as Billy, response dollar dot name is Billy. So dollar is the root of your body. So if you have a JSON request, the response, there is a root. So dollar will represent that root, right? Which is the response itself. And then dollar dot name is Billy, right? So you don't even have to provide response. Dollar is the root and the response. So dollar dot name will have the same purpose. And then you can have different ways to assert. So response status is one of the parameters that comes baked in. So here it's asserting response status can either be 200 or response status can be 204, right? So if any of the response status is 200 or 204, it's going to pass. And the response time, if you want to let's say you're doing some performance testing and you want to make sure that your response occurs in a certain time frame, and then you can provide that response time as 1,000. So how you will do performance testing is basically you are hitting the same API with multiple users, and each user have an assertion where the response time is within a specific time frame. Once you do that, if there is some performance lag and the response time increases, then you know there are some optimizations that you need to do in terms of performance. The most important part is assert. So there are multiple ways you can assert. I'm gonna quickly browse through each level of validation. Did I miss the data part? No. Okay. So the first part is match equal to equal to. So let's assume you have a response that comes as my JSON, which is A is 1. So you're matching my JSON equal A is 1 and B is 2, where my JSON, you are setting my JSON.b as 2, right? So you don't have to actually create a JSON structure in order to in order to create a body. You can just set those values and it will automatically pick that up, right? So you use the keyword set to set that value. So my JSON is foo.bar. If you want to change the bar into world, you set the value of my JSON.foo is world, and then you try matching it with foo world, and it should pass, right? Now, this is one of another comparison where foo is hello world and baz ban, and bar is baz ban and hello world. So the placing of the variables don't matter. It's going to check each node and match if that exists for the whole node, right? And then there is not equal to as well. Now, this is again very important where you're matching with the fuzzy logics, where you have uh, different markers that you can use uh, to do validation, right? You can ignore, you can provide not null or null as value. So if you go here, let's say JSON is foo bar. So we are matching JSON to foo present, match JSON dot no to not present, right? So what we're testing here is if some value is present here, and if uh, we don't have anything on JSON.no, right? So we only have JSON and we have no variable called nope. So if we match it to not present, it should pass because this node itself is not present. But if we are only matching that some value exists, which we are only matching it with present, then it should pass as well, right? So you can definitely try different options, not null, null, not present, ignore, all those you can try validation. You don't have to put any logic. The good part is that uh, these these keywords or these markers come baked in with your Karate DSL itself, right? So you don't have to write a lot of logic or conditions in order to test those things within that JSON. One more I wanted to show was contain, which I think is important. Yeah. So if you look here, contains is also one of the keywords baked into Karate. So we have this response called foo, where bar is one, bars is hello, and ban is world. And then we are only matching that the response foo contains bar one, right? So we don't have to test the whole body or validate the whole body. We are only going to select do partial matching, right? And this is very important when you're doing testing. You don't want to really want to match the uh, whole response, right? Also there is templating in DSL in Karate. So basically, you can create a template and only pick up those values from the response, and then you can validate. So one more is schema validation, which is, let's say we have these two as a list items in a response. So we are matching that it should have a list item, and the list item should be of size 2, and then it should be of size 2, and it should be array of strings, right? And so on and so forth. So you can put as many validations as possible within that particular schema, and this will help you do the schema validation as well. So any schema that changes, even if you're not validating the values, schema validation is also an important part of API testing. Now I'm going to move on to data-driven features. So the best part is you can use uh, the same Cucumber Gherkin data-driven abilities to run karate DSL, right? So if you look here, you have a table of kittens with name Bob Wild 9 and then age 213. So what we are doing here is we are calling this feature, we are running that feature, and we're getting the response, and that response is getting stored and created. Now we are matching each created, basically whatever response we got, has an ID, which is a number, has a name, which is a string, has an age, which is a number. And then we are matching created, any created node dot name contains only Bob Wild 9. And even anything else out of these three names comes, this assertion will fail, right? So this way you can run all the three tests, and then you can basically validate those things. And you can use the same one not just for validation, but for your request as well. So it's going to run as three different tests. So for each row, it's going to run one request, and that's how it's going to create those requests. Calling Java code. So that's one more important part. So what you're going to do is you want to not just do API testing, but let's say you want to validate the response with some another tool or another application or a database, right? So you'll create those custom functions which can be in Java or JavaScript. It's up to you what you want to select, but then this is how you're gonna call your Java function, which is let's say java.util.base64. This is one of the functions that have been created. Uh, you can encode and decode from there. This is basically your library, and this is your library functions. So you can use those functions inside your test itself. So if you're writing any custom code, uh, you can create those Java requests. In the framework section, I will definitely show how to call a Java code and what code we'll be calling, and what will be the benefit of calling that particular code. You can also do conditional logics within the Cucumber itself. So so this is how you will write conditions. So if response status this, and then you're calling another feature file, which is delete user. If response is this, then you're calling delete user as a feature, right? So it's up to you if you want some conditions to be put in your test, you can do that as well. And then you have GraphQL calls, WebSocket calls. So WebSocket is basically your another protocol that you can use. GraphQL is also another protocol. You can use the WebSocket handler and options that you can use to create the connection with the socket. Once you have the socket connection, you can send your request via the socket as a request, and then get the response. Socket remains open, uh, and then you listen to that particular socket within that port, and then you get the result on whatever request you send in as a response. So if you're not familiar with WebSockets or GraphQL, don't worry about it at this point. These are different protocols. that your organization might implement, uh, and Karate gives you that flexibility to uh, use different protocols for testing. And then you have mocks, you have test doubles, where this is based on another technology called Netty, where let's say you're running microservices, but your system is dependent on another microservice. So you can create your own microservice server integration. Um I'm not going to explain this in detail on how it works, but I'm going to talk about what it does, right? So what it's going to do is it's going to create a system where the same response that you were expecting from your third-party system, you're creating that by yourself using test doubles or mock server. And then you're not dependent on that server anymore. More if let's say that server is not stable and some development is going on, you're gonna receive different responses, and then you're gonna do a lot of to and fro troubleshooting why the response was not expected. So in that sense, to keep the system stable, you can create your mocks, your test doubles, and then you can rely on those for and it's not difficult. You don't have to create those responses. You just need to provide those responses, and it will create those responses automatically by creating a contract between a call and a request and a response. And then that's how it's going to do. Lastly, examples and demos. You can go here, look at, there's a simple implementation of the server for demo. You can implement that server. So what we'll do in the next framework is we'll create this server. We'll run some commands from here, and then we're gonna set up the whole framework from configuration, from data-driven testing, from response matching, as well as our reading JSON files. So we're gonna type the code and do hands-on on all the features that we have discussed today. Not all, but probably most of the important ones we'll discuss, and then we'll define the structure of the framework and what other things we can embed inside that framework. Right. So I'm going to leave 10 minutes open floor for the questions. Any questions on today's session?
Sumit, I would go with a few of the questions I have, Sumit.
Sure.
Um, Actually, after your first meeting, I started working on karate. I started loving it. It is very good tool.
Yep.
What is happening is the Maven build, I could do it, and it is working fine with me. Suddenly, our org, they directed all of us to go with the Gradle.
Okay.
So Gradle is a little giving hiccups to me.
Yeah.
Builds and the rest of the stuff. I would request you if you can do somewhere in next forthcoming sessions, if you can show us some Gradle build.
Sure. So next session, I'll not do Maven, I'll do Gradle.
Thanks, Sumit. And one more thing is, do you, from your experience, have you ever seen guys doing UI automation with this, or only API?
Only API. I'll tell you, the UI automation is still not mature enough on Karate. It's work in progress, but if you compare with other frameworks in the market for UI testing, it doesn't even come close to the maturity of the UI framework. But if the idea is to create one platform for both your API and UI testing, and if they're dependent on each other, I would suggest use UI from Karate. But if they're not dependent on each other, don't use Karate UI testing at this point.
Gotcha. Okay. Also, for next I'm going to add one more to my request for the next session at least.
Sure.
I have a use case, Sumit. For
Mhm.
example, I need to get a get call, and I from the request what I get, I need to modify a field from the request, and I have to use it in the corresponding scenario
Mhm.
post as a
So I would not be able. So what I would request you to do is send me that request as well as the use case in the Teams chat for me to see and for everyone to see, and then we can add that use case in our next session as well.
yeah, probably from my org I cannot do, but I would like
No, I don't
I
need
try
I
to.
don't need the exact request. I
Okay,
just want if you can create a simple uh, request in English words on what you exactly mean by
sure.
changing the request. So let's assume your request is that request a JSON body or you're talking about headers. Uh,
It's a JSON body, just simple
so
JSON body
so
returning a
so
response from get call, but
mhm,
one element, say some timestamp, let us imagine. That
right.
timestamp I need to modify for next request of a post body.
Right. So that's good. That's pretty easy. So if I go up, uh, if you go here, so let's say you got a response, right? And I will definitely use it in the next session. I will do something like that. But this is how you will do. So let's assume this is your response, right? Which is A1. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna add, let's say you want to add another value, which is let's say B. So you define it here as part of my JSON root, and you create a node called B, and you assign that value to. So this will become your new request. Right. Now, if you want to modify existing value, let's say foo is bar and I want to change it to world, I will use the keyword set and define that particular node. Let's say it's not foo, it's timestamp. So my JSON is response dot timestamp is equal to the new timestamp, and this will be your new body.
Okay. Mhm.
But definitely, I will add something like this in the next session as well.
Thanks, Sumit.
Anything else, guys?
All right, Sumit, you forgot telling our team the reminder I asked you to tell. Let me do that honor. So, team, the Eventbrite, remember to register. See, if you go to the Eventbrite, right, because we have for this karate, we have 4 sessions, right? Actually, right now it's 6 sessions, but we will finish it in 4 sessions. But for each session, there is a registration link. And if you are going to attend all the sessions of the karate, you have to register all the links, right? All the sessions you have to register in the Eventbrite. So if you don't register, you won't get the reminder and you will forget joining this session. So just make sure immediately after this session, you go to the Eventbrite and register all the subsequent session one after another. So you have that registered properly and the reminder comes and you know how to join and when to join. I just want to make sure that is clearly communicated. Is there any questions on this or any doubts?
Maybe one doubt on that, Khader. Like
Yes.
I'm trying to invite some of my friends.
Mm-hmm.
So should I can I will I be able to share that WhatsApp group with them, or how should I go with?
Yeah. So see, the entry point into the program, attending the program is by the registrations through different forums that we have, right? Like for example, we have published our events in LinkedIn, we have published our events in Eventbrite, we have published our events in Meetup. So the first thing that you need to do is to register through one of these forums. So let me ask you this question to you: which forum did you register and join this program,
I
Madhu?
I found it in Meetup, Father, first.
Correct. So you can ask your team members to register through the Meetup or through the Eventbrite, right? Or through the LinkedIn events, whatever. And then if they register, then they get the link to join this call. And then they can join this call. So once they are in this call, then they can join the WhatsApp group. So because we wanted to have the people in the WhatsApp group only those who joined the program. You understood, right, Madhu? Otherwise, we could have put that WhatsApp link publicly, right? We did not put that publicly. It's a very closed group, and only those who attend the Codeathon programs, so we request them to join.
Yeah, clearly it makes sense, Father. Yeah, that is the right way. I will ask them to do it.
Thank you very much. And those who joined today, just make sure you go to whichever medium that you came through, right? Whether through Eventbrite or LinkedIn or Meetup, just make sure you go and register for the subsequent programs so you remember. And if you don't want to register, at least copy this LinkedIn, copy this Meetup link and keep it somewhere in your desktop, in Notepad or something, or put the reminder, because the link to join the program every session is the same, right? For this karate topic. So you can, either register multiple times, register for all the sessions in the different medium, or copy the Teams link at 7 o'clock. You need to join in some notepad or something in your computer, and then click that link to join every day, every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Right? So you can choose whichever is comfortable for you. But however, we recommend you to go and register in one of those forums for all the sessions. That's our recommendation. All right. So with that, Sumit, I think you closed the session for today. We can say goodbye.
All right. Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Sure.
Thank you.
Talk to you all next week. Bye.